Hi, I'm Paul Cormier. Along with Art, we're the ones that are going to be moving along and helping the Dull Men's Group. Today we have Maurice Iorio, who's a member here and lives in town. And Mo is a retired Army vet, spent 21 years. And after that, he became an outreach specialist for the state. And he'll get into that, some of the benefits that are available. And if you're not a vet, there are some of the things that will overlap and be meaningful to you as well. So again, it's Maurice, we call him Mo. So here he is.
How you doing? Mo without the E. Okay. Oh, this is really weird. Okay. So good morning. It's my pleasure to be here today. When I was asked to give this class or this presentation, Paul and Art asked me, says, what would you like to talk about? And I said, I'd like to talk about my life after the military. Because what I found is that when I was in the military, I was so busy doing my job, I never thought what was going to be after my career. So what happened is that I just went along and give you a little background. I joined the Army in 1965. I was an artilleryman first, Fort Bliss, Texas. I was doing demolition until I watched my instructor get blown up. Then I went over to field artillery and went like that, doing that no more. And then I got stationed Windsor Locks, Connecticut, of all places, on a Nike site, where I got captured by this woman and married her 54 years ago. And then I just went around the world doing all my little things I love to do in the military. So I spent 5 years in Europe, a year in Korea, a year in Turkey, and I finished up being the first sergeant of the intelligence school at Fort Devens, where I had 800 instructors and 3,000 students, and then I got out in 1986 on my 40th birthday. What I found frightful is when I got out, everybody looked at me and said, well, you're 40 years old. What have you done with your life? And I go, I did 21 years serving our country. And they went, okay, so what do you know? So I had sat down and I tried to talk to some of the employers, and I got the impression in 1986, unemployment was high. Interest rates were at 16 to 17%, if you remember that. So fortunately, I had already bought a house when I was in the service. When I knew I was going to be assigned everywhere, I figured let my family in one spot. So I found that getting a job was very, very hard. And I found the reason was there was a perception of what a military person would look like after serving 21 years. My first employers looked at me and said, life after retirement. Well, I went to the unemployment office, the career center now. They looked at me and said, you're getting a check every month. What do you want? We can't help you. So I said, oh, I'm on my own. At that time, the towns did not have a veteran service officer. They did not have a disabled veterans outreach person at the career centers. So you're left on your own. So I found that to be a very arduous journey. I had only person that could support me was my wife, who went back to work while I looked for work to do. I took all kinds of jobs when I first got out. I used to run a home for mentally handicapped adults. I did that for like 7 months. And I found that very enjoyable, but not rewarding pay-wise, because those were almost all minimum wage jobs. Then after that, I said, let me find another job. So I went and applied for the post office. And I got that job because I was a veteran. That's the only reason I got the job. And of all things, they stuck me in a thing called a HASP. I don't think you know what a HASP is. But a HASP is where all the mail goes from all over New England to one spot in Worcester. And when you get in there at 5 o'clock at night, the mail comes in and you can't leave until all the mail's gone. And I went there in November and December of 1986. Even at 40, I don't know how those people do that. So after about 2 months and fell asleep on 190 going home, I went, this is not for me. So I says, you know, I have 2 degrees that I got in the military. I'm also a licensed optician. I said, what do I do next? So I had to do something that everyone I'm sure had a hard time doing, was reinvent myself and try to find something to do that had nothing to do with the military. So I said, okay, so what I did is I started a company called Niche Brokers, which was in town here in Sterling. I was on Beverly Drive. The building I got from Danny Poole before he tragically died. So Niche Brokers was a company that what we did is we would go around to all the companies that had equipment on lease, most like the big ones, and said, what do you do if someone doesn't want to pay the bill? And they say, well, we try to go after them in court and we do all these things and we take months and months and months to get their equipment back. So I had a partner at the time, and him and I had one thing in common. We both had a feeling of what we could do would be special. And he had something very special that I didn't have. He had money. And he said, I'm willing to invest in you. So with that investment, we would go back to those companies and say, look, what do you want? They say, okay, there's 1,000 machines out there on loan that have not been paid back. We'll let you buy them at scrap value. But if you take the machines, you can't sell them. You can only sell them for parts. So what we started doing was become a parts house. We'd take a machine in on Beverly Drive, test it, take all the parts, sell the parts online, throw the machine away. It worked out pretty good till about 20 years later, we became a company from 2 people to like 30. And then you find out that it's a lot harder. It was easier with 2 than 30. Because now you have 30 people plus 30 wives plus 40, 50 kids. Now it's gone from having a lot of fun to being a company. Fortunately for me, as we did this, and we learned more and more, a gentleman in Canada came down and says, you know, I like your company and I understand you got the contract to take over Canada. I was the contract guy, so he bought me. So at that time, it was 2005, and I said, this is really great. I'll do nothing. So one day I walked to the unemployment office. I said, can I apply for unemployment? I paid in. And they said, yes, you can. But do you want a job? And I said, what do you want me to do? They said, would you like to be the Disabled Veterans Outreach Program Director for Central Mass? I said, what does that entail? He says, talking to the veteran service officers for 26 towns and work with them on a daily basis, making sure veterans get preference of service. So I looked at that and said, you know, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I really want to do something because I realized that all of these people are coming into the unemployment office and no one told them what their rights were. No one told them what rights they have for training, what they have for anything. So I went, okay, I'll take the job. And I got re-educated on all the veterans' rights and their rights that they weren't given. And no one told me what I had coming to me. When I retired, I had 10% disability. When I got the job as a veteran service officer, I started looking into it and realizing that all my injuries that I've had are more than 10%. So I started looking into more and more, and I got to 30%. Then I did some more, and like 2 years later, fighting the VA, and this is, as you as well know, back in the early 2000s, 2008 to 2012, the Veterans Administration didn't do nothing for us, and for me especially. So I started working more and more, and finally what I had to do was I got educated enough to get a CD made of all my records, all my disabilities, and I did all the paperwork with Rick and sent it in 3 times. And finally I said, okay, this is crazy. So I took a day off, went to Boston, went to the JF Kennedy building, got a pass, went to the 23rd floor and knocked on the guy's door. And he was standing there, he goes, how can I help you? I said, are you Mr. Scipione? He goes, yes. What's so hard of doing the paperwork? He says, well, I don't know why I keep losing. I said, wait, I have another CD. He says, who are you? I says, I actually work for you. He said, you're in charge of all the DevOps in the state. He goes, yeah. I go, I'm one of your guys. He goes, oh. 2 weeks later, I got approved for 70%. And doing the government, I have to give them some credit. They sent me, I think it was 52 checks at 70% because they counted all the way back from the first time I applied. But they didn't give me a check. They gave me a check for every month. So all of a sudden, of course, the post office called me up going like, what's the scam here? You got this many checks from the government all at one time. So it works. So the bottom line is, the reason I want to talk about this is that I found myself being more and more of an advocate for veterans, and I've always tried. I've been very lucky to have Rick Voltor as a VSO when I worked in Leominster. Because what would happen is, if Rick had a gentleman they wanted to come in or a female soldier that order dependent that was looking for a job and wanted some help from the Veterans Administration or from their 115 program, Rick would call me and make that person have a first appointment. Any training money was available, they got it. Any training they can get, they got it. I ensure they always got their full unemployment with the extensions so that they can become more viable. And my goal was, in my last years of working, was to enhance every veteran's opportunity to learn what their rights are. And it all starts off with, Paul, can you hand everybody that top piece of paper? Paul, excuse me. I know you're all not veterans, but if you know any veterans, I can tell you right now. Oh, very. Oh, man, okay. What Paul's passing out is what I tell everybody. If you know a veteran, and a lot of times we have young people coming back from the service that do not know their rights, and they don't know where to go. And as you all know, no one's going to tell you where to go. Well, they'll tell you where to go, but not the right place to go. So you really need to help them out. And that's part of the goal of why I'm here today is you might not need it, but you might know someone else that does need it. And as you can see, you can go to VA, you can apply for health benefits. I gave you a number there. There's a website that you can go to right on top. And when you do for healthcare, I can give you an example. Do you mind if I use, Arthur, do you mind if I use you? Arthur is a veteran. He was in the Air Force, right? Army for 6 years? 6 years. He went to Emerson the other day. He had emergency surgery done on his gallbladder. One of the reasons he went there is that's a facility that uses the VA. So no cost to Arthur, he had emergency surgery. If that would have happened to someone else that's a veteran didn't know that, they'd be putting their hand in their pocket to get services, not realizing the services for veterans are widespread if you know where to go. And that's what this is all about. So if you know a veteran that needs help, the best way to help them is tell them, like, look, how to file a disability claim. That's what they do all the time. And of course, the most important thing is, if you don't have a DD-214, you have nothing. So if you know any veterans that said, I got that stuff, I threw it all away, stop. DD-214 is the most important document in the world. So we try to help them out. So that's what this thing here is. I always tell them to go to va.gov. But what they don't tell you is there's another site that's just as important. The school and everything else. Oh, that's you again? Oh, I can't make Paul do all this work.
I'm not hearing you too well.
It's okay. So, the next one he's going to hand out to you. Okay. The next one is a lot of people don't know. There's another site called vets.gov. Has nothing to do with the VA. Because the VA talks about your claims and everything else, but vets.gov has only got one function in life, and that's to help you find a job, what companies hire vets, how you can help your military spouses get jobs, how to start your own business, and that's where I found this on when I started Niche Brokers, and the VA benefits you already had. But what I find interesting about the vets.gov and finding a job is that there are certain companies that get money just for hiring vets. I can give you an example. Leominster Hospital, when I became the DVOP, I walked over and talked to the HR person. I said, how are you hiring a vets program? And she says, what hiring vet program? So I gave her the documentation and the regulations and the law. I says, I understand you receive 20% of your money from the federal government. She says, yes, we do. Then you're required to have 10% vets. Well, we don't. Well, I'm here to notify you that I have to give you 90 days, if not, and I have to report you that you're not using your money right. So the next career center had a hire day. Health Alliance came in. They opened up a special room, offered a breakfast for the vets earlier, had a job site out just for that, and they hired like 20 vets in the next 3 weeks. Because they were told, and someone put their thumb on, like, follow the rules, you're getting paid for this. So there's a lot of companies that get federal money but just kind of like forget to follow the last line, which is should be the top line, is vets have preference of service. Right? That happens a lot. So as you can see, it's any kind of job you're looking for employment. It's not just, it's agriculture, transportation, AmeriCorps, all those different places. There's a lot of different ways to find jobs if you know that you have rights. And the only way you find that you have rights is if you go to vets.gov, and they'll tell you what companies in this area receive federal funding. And part of that federal funding is hire veterans. So if you know veterans that are looking for work or having a hard time, maybe they need to find a site, look at it, and get educated. Because I worked 20 years after getting out before I realized I had all these rights and I didn't go after none of them. And now I don't let any of them get by. And that's a whole different way of doing things. And probably the next one I'm going to hand out is just as important, is what you do locally. And locally, we have the last site, mass.gov for veterans. And I always tell everybody that I see, if you haven't talked to Rick Voltor yet, then you're not doing your job right. And before Rick was Rolly doing it there too. But what happens is that a lot of people don't realize after they serve time in the service that there's a veterans bonus program. And when you're a veteran, you get so much money. I get $400 a year off my taxes. If you're a disabled vet and you have over 60% disability from your disability from the veterans, you can apply for a disabled veterans plate. Not the ones you got that says veteran with your service. You look at my plate outside, it says disabled veteran with a handicap and a number. It's really important. I'll tell you why it's so important. I bought a new car last month. Who else bought a new? You bought a new house, right? You pay the taxes on it? I didn't. There's no sales tax on cars for disabled veterans or a disabled veteran plate. There's no excise tax. There's no registration fee, and there's no license fee. So I had that Venza for 7 years. I got about $9 grand out of it in taxes alone. The state here, the town of Sterling, they redid a new computer system. I had to actually take a picture of the plate and show them that it said disabled veterans. And they got rid of the $500 charge in my old car. I don't know what it'll be on this car, but it's gonna be zero. So I tell veterans all the time, if you don't know this right or how to apply for it, you're letting money go right through your hands. It's yours. I always teach people that. I have a young friend of mine, I call him young, he lives in Leominster, and I asked him, I said, aren't you like 100% disabled veteran? He goes, yeah. I says, what's wrong with your plates? So I show him all the paperwork, so we got a disabled plate. He said, okay, I got it all done. What do you want me to do now? I says, now go back to the the people, the taxes, and find the form and file for that. And he called me back, he says, I got $3,800 the other day. I'm like, that's your money. That's your right. No one told me that when I was disabled when I first got out. I could have had disabled plates for a long time, but no one told me. So now I found that out. So the federal jobs program, which is in here also, on the mass hire, the career center that's in Leominster is required that if a veteran walks through the door, he's next. When I got there, they went, oh yeah, who's next, who's next? I went, excuse me, by law, if a veteran walks through the door, he sees a next available agent for unemployment or employment. That's the law in this state. So that's what the federal program is all about. There's also the Veterans Crisis Line that's in there, I put in there for you. The state also has a thing called VAER, which is Federal Employment Agency for training. A lot of people get out of the service. This is the biggest killer for young men getting out. If you know when they just got out. Under VRE, what they're supposed to do is they will give you money to stay in school, and it has nothing to do with the VA. Nothing to do with you're asking for money under the VA to go to school. This is called under the Veterans Employment Act. There's a program there that they're supposed to help you go to school, pay you while you go to school, and help you get the degree you want. And they can pay up to 2 years. So you don't have to, then you can use your GI Bill to finish your your degree up after getting the first 2 years out of the way. So that's all the priority of service that I talked here. And the most important thing I tell everybody, if you know one that needs help, if you don't come see Rick here in Leominster or Sterling, you're cheating yourself. Because Rick is one of the best there is in the state. He's been named the VSO of the year already more than once. He knows his job. He does it very well. And he's got a great staff in Leominster. I tell people all the time, that's the guy you got to go to. So that was him at my time after the military. Is that really what I had was 20 years of working for the government, 20 years in private industry, and finding out after 20 years, 5 years later, all the things I should have been doing to help myself and help veterans. And I try to help veterans every time I see them. I go, what are you doing? You just got out. What have you applied for? When I worked at the unemployment office, every veteran walked through the door. First thing I asked them is, let me see your resume. Let's write you a resume. Let's get you together, get you a job. And that's what my life after the military was a point of being denied services because they thought I had a gigantic benefit being retired. But no one tells you your retirement check is 50% of your base pay. Not your housing allowance, not your clothing allowance, not your food allowance, not any specialties. So when I got out of the military, I was getting a whole $780 a month. It's gone up a lot since then, but that's just because I've lived long enough to go through the 3% 30 some odd times. So in closing, what I tell everybody about life after the military, it's what you make of it. You need to be proactive. You need to really be the person that wants, be all you can be, they say in the Army. Just be all you can be in the Air Force or the Navy or the Coast Guard. It's all about being knowledgeable. And you only get knowledge by asking questions. If you don't ask questions, you get nothing. And one thing I found out from the government, state, federal, and everywhere else, if you don't ask, they're not going to tell you nothing. Because their job, unfortunately, is just to give you service when you ask for it. They don't proactively go out. It's very rare that you have someone like Rick in this area who proactively takes care of stuff. On Facebook, just the other day, he put out there's 2-3 jobs being opening, wanted to hire vets only. He actually gave the job positions. So that's very productive. It's better than a lot of places where the VSO is a person you got to go look to find. So with that, well, that's a quick half hour talking. Is there any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer. Any head knocking and all like that? Tell me to get off the stage, whatever. Yes, Dave.
Question about disability. Does the disability have to be service related, or could it be something that occurs later after you're out?
Well, it depends. Part of my disability is both of my knees, and I had 4 scope jobs done on my knees after I got out of the service. But from what I was doing in the military, jumping out of perfectly good things for a while, it was predicated because I injured myself many times. You'd be surprised when you're in your early 20s and late 30s and you fall down and get hurt and you go, that hurt. That years later, all of a sudden, like, wow, that hurts. And if you have documentation from your medical records showing that you did get hurt, if you get the doctor to look at it, they can start saying, well, that's deterioration from the injuries you received years ago. And the only way to find out is file a claim. If you don't file a claim, then you have no rights. If you have no rights, you have nothing to complain about. So like I said, I retired in 86 with 10%, now I have 70. And I'm gonna be seeing Dr. Hazamovich next month about both my needs for some injections again. And if I was younger, say I was under 65, I can always file for being unemployable, which would brought me to 100%. But since I'm 74, kind of hard to say I'm unemployable because I should be retired anyways. So, and they look at how much money you're getting. I'm getting too much money to say I can't find a job. But that's a good question. I want to thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir, Mr. Rowley.
To follow up on his question, I just recently went to the VA and I was basically went to get my prescriptions through the VA, and they ended up costing me nothing now. But because I had to go through the examination, they said I got low vision. So they sent me to the low vision department in the VA, and the low vision had nothing to do with my military service. But they give me, right now, I'm still getting treated, but they've given me a low vision computer, a low vision lamp, and a huge tabletop magnifier. So you've got to keep in touch with how they're changing their programs all the time. And the next thing I want to say is the Veteran Service Officer in the state of Massachusetts is the best kept secret that Massachusetts has, because I served as BSO for a couple of years in Sterling, and I found out a lot, and I helped a lot of people only because they didn't know I was available until we became got a VSO officer in Sterling.
It's true.
all I have to say.
He's right. You have rights. Yes, sir.
I'd make two comments. Number one, the VA in Massachusetts is a poster child for the whole system. You've gone to other places, it's not nearly as good.
No, it isn't.
That's what we have in this state. A lot of people get out, they're glad to get out, I'm through with it, and they don't get a very thorough medical exam, so there are lots of things you may be eligible for, were eligible for, that you didn't get because you want to get on the road. And they don't tell you this, but the people they have that help you get out are classifiers, and the lower they can get your percentage done, they get a bonus on that.
That's correct.
So you need
They're not
someone
there
to
for
help
you.
go through the process.
They're not there
But
for
the
you.
things in Boston, now down in Worcester, are really first class.
It's changed a lot. I think the main thing is that what's happened is that the services are now being noticed that people need to be helped. PTSD is another subject that they're now doing the research on. I was reading it yesterday in the Harvard magazine out of my doctor's office. The Harvard researcher has come up with a blood test. He says it's a 90% positive blood test that when you get PTSD, there is a chemical change in your body. And it can be found in a blood test. So people go, oh, it's all in your head. No, it's not. Your whole body changes from this trauma. And the way your body thinks and the way your body reacts. So in this program they're looking at is that through the blood test, they can say, you know, you might have PTSD and not know it. You might just have this orneriness in you. You know, be an ornery person. So the bottom line is that you can, you have to find out what all things, and you're right, things are changing constantly. The thing with the ID tag, or with the driver's license and all that good stuff, the state is so different, is that I can't leave this state. I mean, there's too many benefits for veterans. You know, if you look at what veterans get, being a disabled veteran, besides that, when you look at your tax time, there's a big advantage for being a veteran in this state. So, my wife said, we're going to move because it's kind of hard to move because we get so many benefits staying here. And we have the best medical care. So those are the things that you have to look at. So all these things that we're talking about is things that we can pass on to other people. And that's why I want to do this. Anybody that doesn't know what they want to do or what their rights are, please get your butt down here, see Rick. Yes, sir.
One other thing is get a list of what benefits your wife has, and God favors us many, lets us pass first. But someone dies, your wife won't know these things. You need a list, she needs a list of what they are so she can go to someone and say, I think I'm eligible for this, that,
Right.
and the other, or it will be lost.
Well, there's a whole program here in the state, here in Massachusetts, that I don't need to talk about because it's Rick's specialty. But there's a thing called Mass General Law 115. And that covers, it gives Rick discretion to help a veteran or his wife. They get those for you. I think I'll get back to it. I'll help, maybe. Now, 115 does a lot of things. What I found out last week, something new, if you're paying into Medicare, some of the money, the differences in Medicare, some you have to pay that money. If you're financially unable to do that, Rick can apply for 115 money to pay for it as a grant. As you know, grants don't have to be repaid. But those things you have to talk to Rick about. And that's why I don't want to talk too much about 115 because that's his specialty. But it's there. You know, if you look at the law, it's been around for a long time in the state of Massachusetts that veterans and their families are supposed to be taken care of, period. I think that, isn't it right, Rolly, the way it says that veterans are not supposed to be found themselves homeless? And their families should always be taken care of and clothed. And that's what 115 is all about. And the town gets reimbursed, I think, at 70–80% of the money anyways, from the state. So if you don't have Rick help you and you don't get the money, you don't get nothing out of it. It's always the same thing. Knowledge is power. And that's why I'm giving the presentation today, is to give you knowledge. And with knowledge, you get power. And with that, I believe we're done. What do you think, Paul? Any questions from you?
Good.
Thank you, gentlemen.